welcome to the Daily, Senator Erin Maye Quade. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for
Uh,
having me.
right off the top, what emotions are coming up for you when you see everyday Minnesotans bravely standing up against ICE?
I think it's really important for people to know that, for us who are boots on the ground or for people who are doing mutual aid or safety and care or aftercare or legal, whatever you might be doing, it's really hard to like take a step outside of Minnesota and see how people are responding. But in Boston, for example, this weekend, they were chanting, "We're not cold, we're not afraid. Minnie taught us to be brave." Like people around the world are inspired by what we're doing. And so the thing that I have in me every day is just this like immense fire and love for our state and for our communities because we are showing up in a way that was not expected, right? They thought that like our liberal thing of like we care for our neighbors and we love one another was a sign and a slogan. They didn't realize that it was actually real and that we actually do it. And they're seeing what it looks like. There's a lot of fear and terror that's going on for our neighbors and friends. And it makes me like I told a group of people who I help, I said, I am not tired. I am not going anywhere. I could do this forever, and I will if I need to. But hopefully, all of the work that we are doing is going to get ICE out of Minnesota and not to some other state, but end what is happening here so that this is never happening anywhere else ever again.
I think what you said is so important, right? What we're doing in Minnesota is pressing back on Donald Trump's use of ICE to test how far he can push
Yes.
constitutional limits and the rule of law. Quite literally, they're experimenting with this ICE occupation in Minnesota to try to find whether or not American citizens are going to stand up for our constitutional rights and the rule of law, or if we're just going to crumble under the pressure and then he can go to the next state and do the same thing. Talk about how important it is that we are the ones demonstrating to the rest of the country that now is the time to stand up for constitutional rights and the rule of law.
Yeah, and I'll say even particularly right now, I get the sense that national media, national folks, maybe even the US Senate minus our senators, get the sense that Bovino leaving and like meetings where people are on the same wavelength is some sort of change. Nothing has changed. Nothing on the ground has changed. In fact, in my community in Apple Valley, what's changed is that there are more of them and they're targeting bus stops and elementary schools. And so we are seeing an increase in the violence, an increase in the terrorizing, not any sort of change here on the ground. And the and so that I think is like the number one thing I want people to know. This is a turning point. Like we are, Minnesota is apparently the main character of the 20s. Don't love it for us, but apparently we are. And we have shown over and over and over again what it looks like to take that moment, that opportunity, and show the world what can be. And I think that we're going to do that again here. But it is important that people don't let up and don't think that there's some sort of easing in your community or anywhere else because it's just not.
So well said. We have kept the pressure on for weeks now, and now is not the time to let up. We have to keep showing up in
Mhm.
person and observing what's happening because the video evidence is what is actually like people are believing
Yes.
that with their own eyes, and that's a key shift in how we can push back. Obviously,
Yeah.
10. Oh, go ahead.
No, I talk about this a lot. Like, the media tends to conflate observers and protesters. Like, it's not that we don't protest. Of course we do. We had the largest economic strike in Minnesota history in like 80 years. But when we show up somewhere and we are observing and documenting, the reason that they have the stories of little Liam, that they have footage of what happened to Renee Good and Alex Preddy, the reason they have those stories is because observers were there. And if they weren't there, the obscene lies of this administration would be the only thing that people knew. And so, yes, constitutional observing, commuting, patrolling, but you can also do mutual aid. You can donate money, standwithminnesota.com, or find your own local mutual aid. You can pack, you can deliver. There's a lot of things for people to be doing that aren't like, straight up in the streets recording or observing.
Absolutely. Obviously, we've seen tens of thousands of Minnesotans showing up, so many constitutional observers. We've trained here at the DFL over 8,000 Minnesotans from all parts of the state sign up for these trainings. It's now more important than ever for us to continue pressing as hard as we can. We cannot, as you've said, Senator, we can't assume that because Bovino's gone that somehow the situation has changed. ICE is still here. They're still throwing
Yes.
tear gas outside of preschools yesterday morning. And so we have to continue. What's the next step for people looking to take back power from ICE and this lawless administration?
Yeah, the thing I want to tell folks is that because what's happening to us is big, it feels like little things don't matter, but the little things are what's making the big response. And so I don't want folks to feel frozen by the bigness of what's happening and then feel like I can't respond with a big thing to make it stop. You can, but it's that we all have to do something. We don't all have to do everything. So I think I mentioned before, like find in your community, get connected with your community because we are organized community by community, sometimes block by block, depending where we live, and plug in with the time, talent, and resources that you have to give. It doesn't have to be all consuming. And I say that knowing that that is what it's become for me. But it can be, the thing you do now, right? This is for a lot of Minnesota, this is what we do now. We give rides, we protect schools, we pack food, we deliver food, we constitutionally observe. Like this is my hobby now, I guess. I just want folks to feel like they have a place to plug into and know that when a choir is singing, somebody can stop and take a breath without the choir sounding different. And if you need a break, if you've been on the ground since early December, which I know there have people been doing that, it's okay to take rest, take a break. Rest is also resistance. You just got to find your time to get in and then find your pace.
Well said. One big thing that is happening is we continue to try to help Minnesotans make sense of what this situation is. And we've been talking about how this isn't, the retribution campaign on Minnesotans from Donald Trump didn't start with Operation Metro Surge. He's been doing this. He's been doing this for months. It's about cutting funding from the federal government at will. It's about targeting programs that make sure that people can access childcare. It's about him sharing misinformation about Melissa Hortman's assassination. This is all a massive retribution campaign. And Operation Metro Surge really kind of elevated that to deadly levels, as we know. Tomorrow, the Minnesota State Senate is going to, the select committee is going to help Minnesotans continue to make sense of what we're experiencing. Tell us a little bit about what the Minnesota State Senate Select Committee is going to be talking about tomorrow and presenting to Minnesotans for their information.
Yeah, and I will just say first, Richard, you actually introed the select committee really well because it started in the fall to talk about the impacts to Minnesotans of the federal government. So we talked about SNAP, we've talked about Medicaid, we've talked about cutting funding to cancer research, we've talked about LIHEAP, we've talked about higher education, we've talked about rural healthcare. I mean, we have talked about all of those things because it's all, I mean, this is just the armed agent part of the attack on Minnesota, right? The ICE surge. The rest of it is also an attack on Minnesota. But tomorrow's a select committee is going to talk about the impacts to Minnesotans, whether they are Black, Brown, or Asian, whether they are neighbors supporting neighbors, whether they are, churches or food banks. What has the impact been? Businesses, small businesses in particular. So that's what we'll be covering tomorrow. There are, I think, 70 state legislators from other states who are coming to Minnesota to be here because we are trying to warn them too. Like, this is what it looks like when this comes to your state. Hopefully it doesn't, but we know Maine is just starting to get some of this too. And then we'll have a national press call with, I think, hundreds of state legislators standing with Minnesota and also making sure that this ends. I'm going to end with my plea that I have made to both of our senators personally, and I encourage you all to make it as well. Because they need to make it to their colleagues. It is that it's not just that we don't want the DHS funding bill to pass. We want every single thing to stop. Every procedural vote. Do not dedicate a highway. Do not name a post office. Nothing can happen in the U.S. Senate while this is happening in Minnesota because the rest of our government cannot continue to function as normal when this is happening to us. Otherwise, it will say, well, this is a bad little thing, but everything else should continue on. This is a stopping point until we end this in Minnesota and for everywhere. And so that has been my plea to our senators. And if you're writing into your members of Congress and your senators, I encourage you to share that message as well.
Thank you so much, Senator Erin Maye Quade. One more thing, there is a confidential link for people to submit information in terms of the impact that they're feeling in their own community. We're going to drop it in the chat. Do you want to say anything about that link?
Yes, this is information just for the DFL senators on the committee. This is not going to the state government. It's not going to the federal government. It's just for us to have a sense of the scope of stories and allow us to be able to have a version of that told, not individual people's stories, but if we're seeing a common through line, we can have somebody speak to it. So it's helpful and important. Share with your neighbors, but it is confidential and I don't want folks to feel scared. I would use general terms, like I would say, I'm a mom in the suburbs who sends her kid to daycare instead of, I'm Erin in Apple Valley. That's maybe one piece of advice.
Awesome. Senator, thank you so much. I have to commend you. You got 70 plus legislators from across the country to come to Minnesota to stand with Minnesotans in the face of this retribution campaign. Meanwhile, we can't find one damn Republican elected official to stand with Minnesotans from our state. It's really
Yeah.
astounding to me that you're bringing 70 folks from around the country here to stand with us.
Especially when this is happening in their communities too. There is an active ICE raid happening in Zach Duckworth's community right now. People are observing, and he's like, I would love a de-escalation of tension. And it's like, dude, your neighbors are getting kidnapped. Like, you don't have something stronger to say? Anyway, it is abhorrent what we have, the lack of courage or anything we've seen from Minnesota Republicans on this issue.
Thank you, Senator. Really appreciate you being here today. So now what Senator Erin Maye Quade said and shared today really underscores something critical. Resistance takes many forms, and we need all of them. Peaceful protests matter. They shine a light on injustice and rally communities together. Constitutional observers with their cameras get that footage that makes sure U.S. citizens can see with their own eyes what's happening here in this state. We need to also channel that energy into political power, and that's where caucuses come in on February 3rd. Let me acknowledge something. When ICE is in our communities and there are people who are afraid to leave their home, that will impact who can physically show up at caucuses. And so I need to ask all of you to help us push as hard as you can the non-attendee form and encourage people to fill that out and indicate if they want to be a delegate. And then we need to encourage precinct caucus conveners to give consideration to those who can't attend because they're afraid to leave their home to be elected delegate to the organizing unit conventions. It's going to take all of us to make sure that the right voices are heard in this process. But we do need to channel this energy into precinct caucuses coming up on February 3rd and acknowledge the impact that ICE in our communities has.